Welcome to Studio 889, DJ Mo Wilkes. That is yours truly. I have the pleasure to actually welcome one of the actors in the Arts Emerson production of Nehanda. His name is Peter Van Heerden. He is one of the actors in this particular production. So we're going to actually just sit down and have a cool discussion about what it is about, why you should actually see it. It's going to be over at the Paramount May 17th through the 21st. So let's have a cool, nice conversation. Welcome, Peter, to Studio 889.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, tell us a little something about yourself, and then we'll actually go a little bit more in depth about the production.
So I'm born and bred in South Africa, been in the United States about 11 years. I'm currently the executive director of the Quick Center for the Arts at Fairfield University. How do I end up here? I met Nora Shipamira probably about 7 years ago. Saw an incredible work of hers in New York City at a festival and said, this is an artist at the tip of the spear, and people need to see the work she's doing. So we engaged her. We've had her as a senior fellow for the last 6 years. Then COVID struck, and we were fortunate enough to, during that time, Nora had an incredible idea to create this operatic work called Nehanda. We got a Mellon grant, or she got a Mellon grant, and we had what was called a bubble residency. So for 3 months, the entire cast of 16 artists came, and we worked day in, day out for 3 months, creating the work Nehanda in the theater that was dead. And we were very much alive and at it every day. No one got COVID for those 3 months, and we created this work Nehanda, which has toured around the world for the last 2 years, and now we're on our last leg of a U.S. tour, Boston, Montreal, and then Lincoln Center.
Wow. So tell, for those who do not know about the direction or the kind of plot behind this amazing story of like Zimbabwe, pre-colonial Zimbabwe, and it depicts a real person, correct?
Correct. So Nehanda is actually she's like a spirit medium that can only sort of exist inside women. And the story goes that Nehanda was hung by the British in the 1800s, and then she was actually betrayed by her own people. But you can't kill Nehanda because she's a spirit that can still embody any person today. So, we joke that the spirit of Nehanda is alive. We don't joke, but the spirit of Nehanda is alive in us when we make the work and create the work. And she, part of her body, the body of the Nehanda that was killed, was exhumed and taken to the United Kingdom. So sort of part of the impetus, like Nora's big dream of this work when we started, is like, imagine we can get Nehanda's bones back when we make this work, and there's still villages and places within the Shona people in Zimbabwe that are unsettled because of what happened with Nehanda, and that sort of hasn't been laid to rest, and it's still to this day, politicians, people within Zimbabwe, Nehanda is still on people's lips, so it's not sort of like this forgotten archaic history, like colonialism is still on people's lips.
So would she be kind of like the equivalent of what we here in the United States in terms of like a Harriet Tubman type of spirit, in terms of somebody who is a freeing individual for people, symbolic of freedom?
I mean, Nora doesn't like to make analogies, so I'm going to sort of like working through her mind in a way. But,
absolutely.
I think there was definitely the Nehanda story. It became a court case between sort of the natives and the empire back in Zimbabwe, between the Shona people and the empire.
Yes.
And it was part of what, one of the first revolutions out of Zimbabwe. So I think the idea of the revolutionary spirit is more what we would sort of conjure, and this idea that, we will not rest until the fight is over. So I think that's sort of more the area we would play in, and the sort of area we work in with Nehanda.
In your character, are you playing a person who is an assistant of this change, or are you part of the resistance to the change?
Look, I think in the work Nehanda is sort of very much a sort of a spiritual work that looks at sort of the manifestations and the power of change. Like, it is a contemporary narrative work that sort of looks at spirituality, looks at the past, looks at the present, but all Nora's work is like, we are complicit in this idea that things need to change. We need to move on. There needs to be a new structure. There needs to be things sort of done in order to manifest change. So I think that's always sort of the power of Nora's works. Mm-hmm. So every single individual within the work, I think there's 16 of us, we're all in the work the whole time. Nobody leaves the stage. It's a 5.5-hour opera, start to finish. So once the work starts, there's five or six different scenes, depending on how you count them.
Wow.
And everybody's present on stage in the work for that entire time. So there are different sort of, I don't know if the word is characters. There's different sort of manifestations of people, that people play different parts. Mm-hmm. within that. And there's music, there's dancing. It's a very sort of spiritual engagement, and the audience is actually on stage with us as part of the work. So you are complicit in the narrative, you are complicit in the journey,
Really?
you are complicit in the conversation and sort of the forging of this new future.
Touch upon that. It seems like I saw a few excerpts, on screen. It looks like your physical, your being is very tested, whether you said it's the live instrumentation or the singing or somebody, literally suspended in the air. Can you speak to those particular demands on
Sure. I mean, I think, Nora's an incredible artist in terms of the way she works. She works out of what is called the animus space, which means that, when we work, there's no sense of sort of like, there's no direction in terms of people stopping, oh, you move there, you move that. We will be creating a piece of the work, and we will start to do that work, and we will go. And if that chapter takes an hour and a half to make, we will work for that hour and a half and then finish and then have a discussion about what it was, how did it feel. If you're in, there's no 65% or 75%. It's like every time we work, whether there's an audience or not an audience, whatever you're doing, there is 100% engagement in order to create that sort of power that the work holds and manifests and gives back to the spirit's a spiritual work. So I think you can't play 45% in the spirit world. You'll get beaten. You know what I mean?
Wow.
So the spirit will come for you. So I think you've got to give that ethos, and I think all the performers give that all the time, which is sort of truly incredible. I mean, one of the sections of the work is called a pungwi. And in Africa, a pungwi is sort of like a war dance. You'd do a dance all night before you'd go to war, all the young warriors. So you would stand around the fire. Well, you wouldn't stand. You'd dance around the fire for 24 hours before you sort of went off to battle, because this could be the last time
you would actually be seeing.
You'd be that. So one of the pieces of the work is pungwi, which is like an hour and a half, and it's a musical dance piece that, that's what's happening in that moment. We do it in an hour and a half, but it's holding that 24-hour rite of passage for the fight for freedom,
Now, this is the first time this is actually being displayed in Boston.
Correct.
What have been how has it been received in other cities prior to here?
Look, I think it's been really amazing. So, we made the work I can't even remember the date, so it's 3 years ago in September. We've then toured in Rome, Amsterdam, Germany. There's one other country I can't think of.
Has it actually been taken back to the continent too?
So actually, we premiered back. We came back in September of last year. We actually did the first time. We did the full 5.5 hours at the Quick Center, which was like a coming home concert as part of our season. And that was the first time in the world we've done the full 5.5 hours for an audience. And it was amazing. I think it was, it was really surprising to see that people actually stuck around and watched for the full 5.5 hours, because it's not easy watching. But I think, again, the musical quality, the performance, the way sort of, you enter this sort of, because you can close your eye, you could watch Nehanda with your eyes closed and still have a spiritual experience, because the music is just incredible. People are playing traditional instruments. These are guys who've, they didn't pick this instrument up. Their father before their father before their father before their father played this instrument and learned how to play this instrument. So there's this sort of genealogy and cultural history and musicology and dance history that sort of comes, I think, out of all continents, but this one particularly comes out of the African continent and has that sort of historical African narrative, which I think, is obviously very special to me because I'm African, but I think people haven't really experienced that kind of thing. I don't think this kind of work, in my sensibility, and I've seen a lot of works, exists necessarily anywhere.
Have you taken this, or is there plans, because you said you're from South Africa?
Yep.
Would it be also fitting to go and perform this there?
Look, it would be fitting. I just think, unfortunately, the current state of affairs in most of the African continent, they could not afford to, take 20 people on the scale of this work, I mean, we struggle. I think a lot of American institutions at the moment struggle to present large-scale works like that, which is another whole conversation in its own gambit, So I think that's what's amazing, that people, institutions like Art Emerson, the Quick Center, Boston, and people are picking it up and actually presenting it, because the scale of these big works, they're really, really important. And I think there's a lot of institutions and a lot of, the system is struggling to support these large-scale works. Then what does that mean? We're just going to do like one dancer on stage because that's all we can sort of, afford, and that's not the case. So and the challenge, it's a sustainability thing too, because I think we were all together last time in September and there were 25 of us, and then it goes dead, and now we're 60. Back together again. So everybody has a life. Those people can't just sit around waiting for the phone call. So I think it's that's part of the challenge of how do you sustain these large-scale works.
Before starting this particular endeavor, you were also doing things, you said, in Fairfield?
Yeah, so that's where Fairfield University is. That's where I'm based, yeah.
So, no, were you doing something similar to Nehanda?
not myself personally. So, I met Nora and we were working with Nora. So I'm a more presenter. So I present performances like Arts Emerson does.
Yep.
And then my role and the way I sort of got into Nehanda, Nora was, we formed a relationship, and Nora was telling me, I'm going to make this work Nehanda and this is what it's going to be. And she told me about this particular character, which was the Empire. And I was like, well, that's mine. I'm taking that. And she was like, okay, you can have it. So that's how that conversation started. And so I performed previously in South Africa. That's how I ended up in the United States before I became a presenter. So, I hadn't been on stage in 15 years, but this was, one thing led to another. And
too hard to resist.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Now, would the person before, like the person that was you before, embarking upon this, what would you say to now your person right now? This is kind of your last leg. What would you say to the you that was just starting out on this journey? Would there be anything you would kind of advise yourself about?
I mean, it's a really interesting question. I think it's been such an honor and a privilege. Just like there's no ways that I thought that this would happen in the way that it happened. I thought we'd do the bubble residency, and that would be like, it was. I wouldn't have been able to do this. So like, I think this is going to sound weird, but I'm like, COVID was great to me in that regard, because without COVID, I wouldn't have had the opportunity, because I would have been busy. I would have been working. But COVID, we were shut down. There was nothing going on. So there was this opportunity of like, I can actually work with these guys every day, all day for 3 months and create the work. So that was, that was sort of a real luxury and an opportunity. And then to be able to put this work out there and work with Nora and work with this team, it's like a family. We're like a family of 16 when we get together, and everybody's, you can't not hold your brother or your sister when you're doing this work, because, you enter this spiritual space of complete sort of,
Does Nora have more ideas to build upon this that you know of? I haven't really kind of gone into the person that Nora is.
So, I mean, I think within Nehanda, unless something happens where there's an opportunity for sustainability of the work going forward and being sustained for a longer period of time, I think she's going to this will be when we culminate in Lincoln Center on June the 10th. She might put it on the shelf, But she's working on a new work, which is very, very exciting, which we're actually premiering in September at the Quick Center. It's going to be insane.
Oh, wow.
It's based off Waiting for Godot. So she's taken Waiting for Godot and turned it into a piece called Not Waiting. In Africa, if you've ever been to Africa, you spend a lot of time waiting.